Hello, and welcome to Book Circle. I'm Earl Weinberg. This time we continue our reading of Aunt Jenny and the Delayed Quest. Aunt Jenny, having successfully fought back Lilith, is now returning the magical items she obtained in order to do the fighting. And next on the list is the King of Patala, the world of dragons. "Comes now the Lady Jennifer," began the official, but the king cut him off. Yes, the Mouse Queen, I can see." He gestured in bored dismissal, and the official backed away. Turning his gaze upon Jenny and the company, he continued, "And you have brought some little friends this time." Aunt Jenny bowed deeply, her right hand sweeping out to her side and behind her. "Your Majesty, allow me to present those who traveled with me to liberate the city in chaos. Sasha of Hockomock and the Marginalis Scout 3 you met before. These are the Fay Morwenna, Drumthortle of High Dwarrelgard, the Nephil Helgrim, and Lady Finna of the Perrys. Yes, we have heard of your alliance, of how we and others working all together with you and your friends did what no one people could have done and resisted she who was once a human. It must have been glorious. And now you have come to return your property to you." Aunt Jenny reached into her bag and pulled out the silken bundle holding the serpent's eye. She handed it to Sasha, who carried it to the cushions where the king lounged, dropped on one knee, and held it out to him. He swept it up carefully in one taloned hand and rolled it across his fingers. A red glow kindled in its heart. He nodded in acknowledgement, and Sasha stood back and away to stand by Aunt Jenny. "So, you keep your word and return that which she stole?" "Yes, and as promised," she reached up and removed the crown, so cool in her hands. "As agreed, I shall return the crown which you so graciously and generously loaned to the venture. We will need to tear it from the symbol of the joint power of your grand alliance. For me, you will rend it in pieces?" "I did merely borrow it, and agreed to return it." "Oh, well played, little Mouse Queen." "I'm sorry, I merely—" "Yes," he nearly spat the word. "You merely returned to sacrifice your crown, your power, the power you assembled that you declared rose from many people. Sacrifice it to me, in my name. That which turned the tide on that she-thing is to be rent apart, destroyed because you are honorable. And I, your Majesty," she bent her knees and dropped a small bow, "I intended no harm. We all are indebted to you. I merely wished to repay." "Oh, well played, well played. But you are right, you are in my debt, and through you—" He paused, collecting himself, and leaned back into the pillows. He breathed deeply twice and continued, "But I would be a fool to demand that you unmake that crown of serpents and twigs, your source of power, just to collect a debt. I would be seen to be the destroyer, the breaker of alliance." The crown warmed in Aunt Jenny's hands. "Well played, little mouse. Sly as one of your weasels. Once more you win. You may keep the serpent crown. It is the foundation of your power, your victories. Let all see it and know that I, the king in Patala, grant you the power for your victories. I am the empowerer, not the destroyer. I will not enter your trap. But still you are in my debt, and weasel-wise you may be, but do not think to emulate your nasty little mongoose. That would be a step too far. That would not be wise. Aunt Jenny inclined her head once more before raising the warming crown, setting it back upon her head, and standing straight and tall. Once more you have been generous, and I acknowledge the debt I owe you. Is there a thing with which I may replace the crown? Oh, you will think of something, little queen, by which to prove your honor, to discharge your duty. For now it will suffice that through my gift and your efforts, we have turned back that creature, and the Halflands are safer. Patala is safer. You have your alliance, your crown. This time the whole company inclined their heads with Aunt Jenny. Thank you, Your Majesty. You may go now. Generosity is tiring. Of course. They backed away and around the corner of the hedge. This way, instructed the official. The honor guard fell into place around them. They walked in silence back toward the docks. The crown grew warmer and warmer on Aunt Jenny's head, and she had to struggle not to reach up and touch it. Down the steps they went and through the city, surrounded by an even wider myriad of serpentine forms that she had seen on her first journey. At the pier, she broke the silence only to thank the official and the escort. That, and Kat's quiet order to cast off, were the only words uttered until they were well clear of Patala and sailing downstream on the Malula, Mother of Waters. Wow, it was Sasha who finally broke the silence. More than ever, agreed Aunt Jenny. So, was it well played? Was that your plan all along? Not consciously. Oh, I hoped for some way not to dismantle this. She tapped the crown lightly. I meant what I said about it being both a thing of power and a symbol of the power of unity and collaboration. But no, I wasn't scheming. I don't think I was. After a while, she continued, I was talking about this with Maeve one-on-one back in Illimcrown. I confessed that I didn't want to give it up. She grinned hugely. I called it my precious. I don't think she got the reference, but I kind of meant it. It is hard to relinquish. The precious? Really? So with the familiar and the magic crown, are you ready to be the witch queen? That'll be quite enough out of you, young lady. Aunt Jenny mocked a scowl, and they both laughed. Little was said all the way to Iram. On the pier, they were greeted by an officer of the Iron Horde. Your Majesty, Queen Jennifer, Jianling Katan sends me to arrange a visit with her and one or two guests. And when would Sister Ling have us arrive? The Katan hopes that you would come on the first convenient evening after your arrival. I see. Aunt Jenny looked up at the mid-afternoon sun. This evening, then? Will it be a formal affair that requires much preparation? No, I am instructed that it is but a small, informal gathering. Small. How many of my companions should accompany me? The Katan hoped that you would bring the Lady Sasha and perhaps one or two others, if that is convenient. And will you have a palanquin to transport us once again? Yes, Your Majesty. Very well. Is there anything more? No, Your Majesty. Then please tell Sister Ling that I look forward to this evening. The officer bowed and withdrew. Cat transported them out to the Blue Swan, on whose deck Aunt Jenny briefed the company on what had transpired in Patala and told them of her evening engagement. "So you will be abroad once more with minimal escort?" asked Morwenna. "Yes. Is there a problem?" "You are now well recognized as a queen by the rulers of several realms, and at war with the mother of monsters. It might be wise to take more precautions." "I agree," said Helgrim, shifting uncomfortably from foot to prosthetic foot. "I imagine you're right. Still, I am a queen more in name than in fact. I don't rule or command an army. My company is more a band of compatriots than of followers. For now, at least, I think we'll have to settle for a slow transition to a new role. All of you," she looked out at the Fey escort at anchor all around her. "I was going to say that you were all there was to my realm, but few librarians travel with the flotilla. Perhaps we are further along than I am ready to acknowledge." Helgrim smiled. "As I said back at the Rest, when you denied being a real queen and having subjects, have you asked them? Folk have given life and limb for you, to protect you. You are one of the things we do not wish to risk losing." "I guess it just won't do to say that I'm not ready to have people fight and die in my name, even if I still feel that way. I just cannot get used to others taking such risks for me." She paused and looked Helgrim in the eye. "If I admit that I need to start acting a little more like I should be wearing this crown, could I get you to sit down and rest, my friend? Because you may serve in Her Majesty's company, but you will never cease to be my friend and companion as well, and my patient. You need to rest. If I worry a little more about me so you don't have to, could you rest a little more?" "Yes," he smiled wickedly, "Your Majesty." "If you're going to be like that, then how about this, General? I hereby charge you with recruiting, organizing, and leading my royal company, a position that will involve a certain amount of sitting behind a desk." "Yes, ma'am, Your Majesty." "Now, I've been invited to a small informal evening gathering with the Catan and one or more members of the ruling council of Irem. What if Sasha and I are accompanied by Morwenna and Finna? Is that sufficient escort to satisfy everyone?" It was agreed that that would suffice. A few hours later, Aunt Jenny and her little ones, Sasha, Morwenna, and Finna, debarked from Cat onto the pier. A pea-cat landed upon Aunt Jenny's shoulder and a pea-kitty on Sasha's. Finna shrugged one shoulder, then the other, then both, and standing very straight withdrew her wings into her body. That accomplished, a pea-kitty landed on her shoulder too. Once again the floating palanquin arrived and carried Aunt Jenny and her companions through the streets of Irem and up to the balcony of the Catan's tower suite. This time Jian Ling was on the balcony when they arrived, looking out over the city. "Welcome, Aunt Jenny," she said. "Thank you for inviting us, Sister Ling. You remember Sasha, and I believe you know Morwenna. This is my friend and companion Finna." "Good to see you again, Sasha and Morwenna. I've heard good things about you, Finna." "The Catan has excellent spies," Aunt Jenny feigned to confide to Finna, causing Ling to laugh. "And how are yours, Aunt Jenny? What do you know of our city of Irem, her history and politics?" asked the Catan. "Very little. I understand that it is now ruled by a Grand Council, that hasn't always been the case, that you ruled Irem for a time before that. In mortal lands, Catan is the title of a female Khan or Kagan, a woman who rules in her own right and is associated with Turkic peoples and the Mongols. You lead the Iron Horde, and Horde is another word of Turkic origins. You and the other Horde members I have met look moderately Central Asian, and I would guess your folk have lived here in the Halflands for several hundred years, the better part of a millennium. I see a very wide variety of ethnic appearances among the people on the streets of Irem, and I would guess that they represent what were more distinct and separate cultures or nations for most of those centuries. and that Irem is only recently united, perhaps first by you, and then some sort of alliance creating the council. You are largely correct. The current council is less than a century old, though it is hard to measure the passage of time here accurately. Time passes differently for different people and in different places, and Halflanders often age at different rates. The influences of chaos and magic distort all that. Philosophers and scholars debate exactly how. We've seen some of that ourselves since we arrived from our realm. Sasha at one point lived through 2 or 3 months at least, while only a few days passed for me. In the time since we arrived, however you measure it, she has changed a good deal physically, too. She's grown inches in months, though she had pretty much stopped growing back in the mortal lands. Al-Bahinth, whom I have met, is human, but centuries old. He doesn't know why he has aged so slowly. Yes, and all of that is important to Irem's ruling council. We were several warring tribes and factions until several decades ago. In terms of your family, it was years after little Jenny passed through. From my perspective, the way time traveled back home, little Jenny left our realm for the first time a little over 120 years ago, and returned from her second journey 5 years after that. Then you might think of the council as being 3/4 of a century old. It was formed to unify us against a common threat, one of the Lamia, the children of she who was once a dragon. Her name is never spoken in Irem. She still lives, and is known here only as the Vampire Queen. One of her granddaughters, Ilara, sits on the council. Really? A Lamia is on the council? Yes, the council was formed to unite Irem, and you really only have to unite folk who are different and prone to conflict. The council is the reason Irem flourishes and is generally at peace, but it is no stranger to intrigue, schemes, and politics. I needn't explain in detail to one who wears that crown. Thank you, said Jenny. And here come my other guests. I informed them when I was told that you were on the way. Ling stepped back. Aunt Jenny heard a low thrumming noise behind her and turned to look out over the city. We're definitely leaning toward Planet Mongo side of things now, Sasha. You think? Where else do you find an Art Deco retro-futurist flying car? I can see why your generation is disappointed that you never got flying cars. Aunt Jenny delivered Sasha's line with a smile. You think? Aunt Jenny took Sasha's arm and, like Ling, backed away from the balcony's railing. Sure enough, coming toward them was a brightly colored flying car, straight from the pages of the comics or science fiction pulps of nearly a century past. It was plump and curved, with stubby little wings, a pointy prow, and a bubble canopy windshield. It slowly arced around to settle in for a landing just behind the flying palanquin that had brought Jenny and her group here from the pier. Gull-wing doors whooshed open as the short two-stepped gangplank unfolded. A tall, platinum-blonde man who looked to be about Aunt Jenny's age stepped out and, reaching the balcony, turned to offer his hand to a stately, handsome woman of about the same age. He was dressed in a military-looking red jacket, black slacks with gold piping down the side, and cavalry boots. A long, graceful pistol of some sort and a saber hung from his hips. The woman was wearing a long, flowing coat, also somewhat military-looking, but with an East Asian flavor. Her chestnut hair was streaked with white. The last person to step out of the air car was an elderly, bespectacled gentleman with gray hair and beard, wearing an olive safari jacket over khaki pants. The other two each offered him a hand down, and he descended rather slowly. The Khatan made the introductions, gesturing to each person in turn. Aunt Jenny, allow me to introduce Professor Henry Morris, Victoria Lovelace, and Brett Bradley, my fellow council members. Colleagues, this is Jennifer, promised 12th Queen of Avalon, and her companions, Sasha of Havamak, and the ladies Morwenna and Finna. Interjected Rudy. Yes, and Rudy and Big Tom, said Jian Ling with a smile. It wouldn't do to forget them. It's a pleasure to meet you all, said Aunt Jenny. The counselors replied in kind. Why don't we all step inside?" invited Ling. The silk-draped room had been somewhat reconfigured to host the group's dinner. There was now a large, low table decked out in a wide variety of foods, surrounded by an assortment of stools and cushions for sitting. The diners spread out, for the most part intertwining the groups, alternating members of the council and the company. "So, Professor Morris, Sister Ling tells me that you are also from the mortal lands," said Aunt Jenny once they were seated. Well, yes and no. From mortal lands, but not the mortal lands. You and I may be from different, even very different Earths." "Really? Could you explain?" Yes, of course, though you should promise to stop me when I wander off too deeply into the science of it all." He chuckled and took a bite of lamb. "It's something of a professional foible." "I've spent much of my life among academics, I understand." "Good. You are familiar with the concept of a multidimensional universe, that there are 3 physical dimensions and 1 temporal one?" Jenny nodded, dipping an herbed flatbread into a tangy sauce. "And coming to the Halflands, you must realize that there are several more dimensions, at least one along which they are separated from what you call the mortal lands. And while you have been here, you have experienced the notion of other dimensions, and if you think about it, dependent dimensions. Here, the physical dimensions are tied to the metaphysical ones. The way that the sun behaves differs from dawnward to duskward, and similarly, there are other differences on the winterward to summerward axis. Beyond that, there is the axis from chaos to order." "Yes, we've experienced all that." "Well, it may not surprise you to learn that while on the whole the place you came from is closer to the order pole than the Halflands, it isn't merely displaced from here in that one direction, and isn't the only world more orderly than here." "I hadn't thought about it, but yes, you are right. If one can step off the world that one is in by means of the witch paths, then there must be some direction for them to lie in. Not one of the 3 we know. That direction must be a dimension like the physical ones, not just a measurement of order and chaos." "Exactly. In physics, we talk about a number of universal constants, things like the g of gravity, the speed of light, c, or the fine structure constant, alpha. Well, in the larger sense, they are not constants. Each is a point along the axis of a metaphysical dimension. Different worlds exist in different parts of what I believe to be a 13-dimensional space. Do you follow?" "Yes, go on." "One of those dimensions is based upon a value we will call psi, using the Greek letter, which is our position along the order to chaos dimension, or a dimension which is dependent upon or nearly congruent to the order-chaos dimension. What psi measures is the efficacy of the will, human or otherwise, on the matter and energy of the world, that is to say, how well such things as magic or psionics work." "And you are suggesting that this dimension is different from, but runs nearly parallel to the Halflands' duskward-dawnward dimension?" "Just so. Moreover, there may be distinct Earths that you would call mortal lands, with very similar planets and histories, parallel worlds that differ by some small value of psi. Now, when the Fays call the sort of places you and I are from the mortal lands, they tend to mean places of lower psi, places where, according to the authorities they recognize, they are not supposed to go, places where magic doesn't work particularly well. Places with a somewhat higher value of psi tend to be called human lands, and that's more often than not how my place of origin is referred to." "So we may not be from the same mortal or human lands, but rather similar parallel worlds?" "Exactly." "And so, if Sasha and I wish to return home, we must not go merely to Winston, Massachusetts, shortly after the day we left, and so on, but to a particular XYZTGC alpha psi, and so on? Off by little on any one of those, and there might be another Jenny and Sasha, and off by more, and there may never have been a Jenny and Sasha at all." "Just so. You are, however, lucky." "In what way?" "You are from the world of little Jenny, as I understand it. It was your very own relative, who traveled here a century or so back." "Yes." "Well, she is well known here, and there are objects, artifacts, portals, and such associated with her. Proper analysis of them and anything that you may have brought with you may be able to help in finding the way back. I say may because, to be quite honest, I am confident that you are not from the same world as I am, because I was part of a project years ago to look for you, and we failed. There is no record of a little Jenny in the world of my origin. We looked. You looked for me? Yes, when the Archmage was killed and the Tower of the Winds destroyed. The mirror portal from the tower to little Jenny's home was destroyed with it. You had not arrived, and so Alba Heath and I and a few others decided to pool our knowledge and go looking for you. Brett and I traveled home for the first time in a few decades, but there was no sign of little Jenny. Surely she would have been written about in the pulps, books, or graphics, but there was nothing. At this point, Aunt Jenny felt a soft, familiar, warm hand resting on her shoulder, and Big Tom stood up with his forepaws on the table. We may have some assistance getting to the right world. Now get down, Big Tom. Oh, yes. Big Tom the cat appears to have come from Fey lands to find me, traveling from here to there. Also, Dr. Tom, my late husband, has been of some assistance. The late husband, yes, of course, said the professor rather indulgently. And now, the meal goes on, and we learn more about the metaphysical geography that Aunt Jenny has been traveling through, and how she may use that knowledge to get back home. Thank you.